Perfect. Thanks for joining this. We usually end on a high note, and this is one of the last sessions. It's the famous Kaggle Grandmaster panel. We have some of the best in the world, so I'll go around. It'll take the entire session for me to introduce all of them, but I'll try to keep it short. I'll take 90 seconds. First, we have Shivam Bansal, triple Kaggle Grandmaster, Director of Customer Data Science. Shivam has been one of the top ranked in notebooks, top ranked in datasets, and beyond that also he contributes to a lot of things at H2O. After Shivam, we have Parul Pandey, who's been ranked in the top 10 in notebooks. Beyond that, she's also an incredible storyteller. She's also recognized worldwide on LinkedIn as one of the top voices in our field. As I said, I can keep going on about everyone's accomplishment, but I need to keep it short. For the last two people, there's one thing in common, which is the number of competitions they've entered on Kaggle is somewhat equivalent to the number of gold medals that they have on their profile. So any competition they touch, they usually gold medal, and you can deduce one gold position because they're going to win it. So first we have Chunming Lee, who's one of the best in NLP. He's famously known as a model whisperer, and he can get NLP models to do anything. And finally we have Pascal Pfeiffer. He's also known as ILU on Kaggle. He's currently in the top 5 in Kaggle rankings, ranked as 4. You might know him through Team Hydrogen Torch and Team Hydrogen on Kaggle. They also usually end up winning competitions. So I'll probably start by asking a question to you all. We've heard the term Kaggle Grandmaster many times. What does being a Grandmaster mean to you? And we can go around the circle, so maybe Pascal, if you could start.
I think it means a lot of dedication that you just spent there. I think everyone who's going for these ranks knows that it's not only being good in one competition or releasing one good notebook. It's about being consistent in the results and always strive for what is the next best thing, because AI is a moving thing, and there is always new things being researched on. So staying on top is really a grandmaster thing, I guess.
Okay, I guess from my perspective, I have two thoughts about it. The first is that being a Kaggle Grandmaster is being part of a community of some of the top data scientists in the world, but not just top, but people that are passionate about it, because I think it's not a job. You have to actually be very passionate to spend the time on it. The second is that it's a concrete manifestation of the amount of time you spend on it. I think if you ask a lot of GMs, it's really about time. And when I think of GM, I think of the hundreds or thousands of hours you spend on it. So that's a huge investment of time.
So for me, I think Kaggle has been a source of learning. For me, Kaggle is synonymous to learning. Kaggle is synonymous to community. And when you become a Grandmaster, you become the unofficial ambassador of Kaggle. And thereby, every time you decide that whenever you put your work out, it should be not only for your learning, but also for the benefit of the community.
And I would say being a Kaggle Grandmaster means always thinking out of the box, always thinking innovative ways, creative ways to solve the same problem that we have been solving in day-to-day life, but how can we go beyond that? So being a Grandmaster, I feel, need to think like over the mile, need to think how, say, best practices that we learn across different scenarios. It could be Kaggle, it could be customer problem, it could be various other open-ended problem. How can we like really innovate in that and get the best out of it? So that's what Kaggle Grandmaster to me is. And just one more point is like ability to hustle, ability to hack around things, ability to get things done with whatever it takes. I was pursuing my master's studies close to 5-6 years back. I don't know if it is a sacrifice, but in terms of priority, I always kept Kaggle as the top priority. I kind of missed on some maybe co-curricular or some educational stuff, but I kind of participated a lot, spent a lot of time on Kaggle that time. So probably that can be one sacrifice that I had.
Yeah, I think Kaggle does come with its own set of pros and cons, and you actually have to devote a lot of time to it. I remember I was working on Kaggle during the COVID pandemic. So we used to be at home, and that was the time I picked it up. For 8-9 months, I used to continuously work on it. I'm also a mother, so sometimes my kid would tell me like, "Mom, you're always on Kaggle." So this did happen, and so during those times, I used to make sure that I either get up early in the morning to do Kaggle, or maybe stay up late. So yes, there were definitely a lot of sacrifices.
Sounds like a future grandmaster in the making.
I guess from my perspective, I don't know if you call it sacrifice, but I think the interesting thing for me is when I joined the company, I was only a competition master, and I was working with a team of grandmasters, so I felt a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. And although the team would say that, oh, there's no pressure, work on it when you can, I would say the biggest sacrifice, is just the peer pressure or being surrounded by some of the top GMs in the world and being pressured into thinking I need, to become a GM. So I think that, from my perspective, was it.
Yeah, I can maybe add the addiction part that Kaggle really sparks in me. So yeah, having this sacrifice, which is mainly a time sacrifice, so you try to shave off time from other activities that you probably need to do, but you feel like you have to do that next step in Kaggle. You have to do one more model run. You even check the model being finished at 2 a.m. or something, and want to retune your parameters. So it's yeah, you need to be careful a little bit about not being too addicted and to not sacrifice too much, as everyone else was also mentioning here.
I have one thing in common with one of the best grandmasters, which is an addiction to motorbikes, and Pascal once told me in confidence that he finds Kaggle more addictive than motorbike riding, so that really speaks to it.
Yeah, he gave up motorbiking.
I'm sure you get this question a lot. How should we Kaggle? How should we get started? I want to ask you, why do you Kaggle in the sense that how is it helping you at work? So what parallels do you see from Kaggle? You build incredible products all across the board. This panel has built many things at H2. So what parallels do you see between Kaggle and the real world or the work you do?
Maybe I can hop in first because I think it's also relevant to the audience. I think one thing that being on Kaggle has helped me a lot is the notion of working in a team with people that you might never meet or don't have a chance to get to know. I think up till yesterday, I had been working intensely with Pascal, but we've not met each other. In fact, I think yesterday we met for the very first time. So I think Kaggle is very helpful in the sense that it teaches or forces you to learn how to collaborate with people remotely. And I think many of you in the audience are part of global organizations where you're constantly working with teams in other locations. That's a very good skill set that's not really technical. This notion of how do you collaborate as a team, I think that's very important.
Yeah, one of the similarities that I see in, say, Kaggle competition and probably the business problems from the customer is the approach to solve those problems remains essentially the same, though every Kaggle competition may be different, every data set may be different, but the overall flow in approaching the problem, structuring the problem in right steps, that essentially also we apply in the real customer problems too, because business problems are always open-ended, challenging, but the biggest skill that I have learned from Kaggle is how to really structure the open-ended problems in the right steps and then take them step by step. That's one of the biggest learning that I personally have got from Kaggle.
Yeah, so besides learning, being in a team, these are very important skills. I think one thing that that's sometimes overlooked is how you can actually work on a timely manner. So you have a fixed date where you need to perform. And this is exactly like, the private leaderboard will be revealed on this day. So you need to structure all your work to get the very best results in the end. And you usually not do it by training super large models at the very beginning. You probably can squeeze out a few more points and top the leaderboard at the beginning, but it doesn't bring you any value in the end. And that's for all data science problems. You probably want to iterate very fast in the first weeks or first days, and then you continuously scale up. And I think this is a very valuable skill that Kaggle teaches, as opposed to maybe some projects you have internally in a company with no strict deadline. But you really get the feeling of structuring your own work better.
I think just to add on what each one of them said, personally what I learned from, so I was mostly active in the notebooks section, and I used to write really bad code before that, code which only I could understand, or maybe after some time even I could understand. I really learned how to write and structure a code in a very structured manner, so that, because I was putting it out to the public and the public had to read it, so I used to, and then they would vote for it eventually. So I would make sure write good quality notebooks, and while doing that, it helps me in writing. So when you write technical articles, they're very different from the other kind of storytelling, because you have to explain the results, you have to explain your figures, your plots and everything. And it's essentially, while working on Kaggle for so long and writing notebooks, that translated to the way I started writing articles. And then I started explaining stuff. So today I take a lot of workshops also. And that's, I think, eventually, if I look back today, that's what actually helped me, and then it finally concluded by writing a book. So for me, that has been the real change, the way I write code, and I like to attribute it to Kaggle.
I need to point two facts out that Parul, this is true all across the board, but Parul was being very humble. Her highest rank has been 7 in notebooks, so that really speaks about her storytelling skills. And Pascal was talking about time management. For any one of you that's familiar with Kaggle, competitions go on for 3 months. Team Hydrogen famously joins 11 days to 14 days before the deadline and finishes in top 10 every single time for the last few competitions that they've joined. I'm also curious about all of the apps we've been showcasing to the community today. If you could point out any few parallels. So for example, DocChat and LLM Studio were announced, or even Hydrogen Torch, if you could point out where your Kaggle experience makes it into the products, if at all, if you see any parallels.
Yeah, definitely. I think the very first learning step that you need to take is very helpful. So in Kaggle, as said earlier from many of the people here, you have new techniques coming up every day, and you need to filter out what is the best right now, and what should I be learning right now, because you can't read all of the papers, all of the theory behind it. And this becomes a skill as a Kaggler to filter the noise from the actual real impactful papers and the real impactful techniques, and you can then apply it to your products as well, because you need to learn new skill sets every time that you're working on a new project, because you may be coming from computer vision going to NLP. It's different, but it's also the same in a sense. And it's not only for data science probably, but for all possible activities within a company. So I think this is very transferable.
I guess from my perspective, from a bit more of an abstract standpoint, the way to tie the apps or the platforms that we build, in many cases, it's not a responsibility. We're not asked to do it. In many cases, it's something that we are passionate about or something that we are interested in, and then we go ahead and do it, right? So there's a theory, LLMs, there's a lot of information up, but to actually build something, right, I think that's the step that a lot of people stop at, where there's a theory, you actually need to build something from theory, right? And I think Kaggle is very good at teaching you or forcing you to go beyond theory and building something usable.
I guess that also relates to Maker's gonna make a slogan that we go along with.
Yeah, actually, Sayam has also built some of the apps, so I would love to hear your experience.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, like Chunming pointed out, so peer pressure, that all of my colleagues are putting out these world-class apps, and that put me under pressure to also get onto it and start making apps. So in a few weeks, the H2A community will see about 15 to 20 apps that I'll be sharing in the world of LLMs. And it's this peer pressure that also forces you to work harder and do better from my perspective. But furthering in the same question, this was also sort of focused on model building, but zooming out, there are also storytelling skills, there's also interpretability, and Parul is an expert on the topic. She's also authored a book. So I'm curious if these skills that you've learned on Kaggle have also translated to work, because it's always this question, right? Like, I'm spending so much time on this platform. Is it helpful? Where is it helpful? I'm trying to help draw the parallels for everyone in the audience.
So like I think Pascal mentioned, the pace at which the field of AI is progressing is alarmingly, you could say, it's just so fast. So I used to do a lot of research when I used to write my notebooks, like what is the latest library or how you can make this plot better, and so it's just that research sort of a bug caught me, and then from there then that becomes a habit of yours. You start researching. But it was, I think we had this talk from Agus, and a lot of work from Agus actually had inspired me, especially in the domain of interpretability. Because the fact, when you see examples around you as data scientists and people who create AI products, I think while it's also important to create accurate products, it's our utmost duty to ensure that the products that we create do not harm anybody. I mean, for example, you create mobile phones, and those mobile phones, there's hundreds and thousands of tests that happen, before they release the phones and they come to your hand, just to ensure they don't burst in your hand the time you use it. That amount of rigorous testing is still not there in machine learning. We are still in a lot of experimental phase. So instead of, so my idea of machine learning would be that one day we don't wait for things to happen and then we take some steps back. So let's say for autonomous vehicles, we don't have to wait for people to be killed before we take actions. Before bringing out the product, we make sure that product is safe and it isn't biased and does not harm communities in any way, because I never want to be a person who would want to be denied a loan just because of my gender, race, or other nationality. So that sort of a thing, I started going deeper into it, really influenced by what Agus says, and unfortunately I got in touch with few people who are experts in this field. We thought of like there's a gap in this, and we really need a book which talks about not only the theoretical and the societal impacts, but also practical ways to test your models, like red teaming your models, or attack your models before other people attack your models, and adversarial robustness and testing, all those sort of things. So for 1.5 years we've been working, and fortunately on 17th our book goes to print finally after 1.5 years of hard work, and I'm really excited for the community to read it, and for your feedback, and in some way I think I attribute all this that has happened to the day I started on Kaggle.
Yeah, so we're coming on the last few questions. I just want to remind you all that I'll also be taking audience questions, so please keep your questions ready for us. But Shivam, same question to you. You're also an expert storyteller, and I want to point out this fact that Shivam was a grandmaster in notebooks, and then I was catching up with him. He said, I want to target the other categories. 2 months later, he was a 3x Kaggle grandmaster. So that's the level of dedication that Shivam has. But same question for you.
Yeah, I would say, taking parallels from what Parul shared, one of the things that I also really enjoy from Kaggle is learning from others. There are like a lot of very good experts, other fellow grandmasters. So sometimes we can call it as, say, copy paste, but in other words, it's like literally looking at what other people are doing, what we are missing out, what are the gaps in, say, our solution versus the others. So that's what I also did. Go through, say, hundreds of solutions shared to the same problems and try to learn what is new, what I could maybe add on to my knowledge. So doing this iteratively have really helped in like structuring my solutions, providing right stories, providing right models, And one of the other important thing is sometimes just generating the final model accuracy is not the important part. It's also around that model, how that model is going to be consumed, how that model impacts someone other's life as such. So Kaggle will provide us the problem statement, but I do always think what are the next milestones for this model as such. So thinking out of the box, which I already mentioned, I have like learned this from my Kaggle experience, and that's what I also applies in the other parts, and that's what I did in some of the notebooks, some of the discussions, and also the competitions.
Shivam was very active in the early days of Kaggle around 2017 to 19, not so early, but I remember his notebooks were the first few that broke the 1,000 upvote mark a few times. I think quite a few of his notebooks. We're coming up on my final questions. Please keep your questions ready, but I usually end up on this. What's your best advice for people in the audience today?
Just to quickly share, I will say just one point. Don't deviate. I have seen this a lot personally. I have seen this. We start something, in the middle of the things we probably find something else, something interesting, let's say another course, another book. But one thing that I have really seen that whatever you have started, finish it. It applies to Kaggle, it applies to learning data science, it applies to learning new skills. You may find it boring in the middle, but there may be other challenges, but if you are focused on finishing it, completing it, it's gonna really help. So that's one of the biggest advice I want to share.
Parul is already approved for us to copy and fork, so I guess it's fine. It's okay to copy and fork and start from there. To repeat the question for Pascal, what's your best advice today?
I understand. No, I think one of the biggest advices I can give for Kaggle or competing on Kaggle would be to learn from others, because that's what I always try with when I compete. I try not to take the challenges that I know are easy, because it will be just last year's solution, maybe a little bit modified, and that's all. I try to learn from ideas from others and try to push the boundaries then for new ideas, or even combining ideas from others, thinking about the data actually from different angles. So really take it as a learning experience. I mean, it does sound a bit latent here, but it's really the core of Kaggle to take it as a great learning experience where you can improve your own skill set.
I guess maybe just from a practical standpoint, and maybe I'm stating the obvious, is you just have to put in the time, right? Because you're going to be competing with people that are putting hundreds of hours on a competition. So approach a competition with humility. You know, if you're competing with people that put in X amount of hours, right, then you just have to think about that, I guess.
My advice for Kaggle or any other platform or anything that looks daunting at first would be just stick to it. Don't work in isolation. I would advise get yourself like-minded teammates. It really helps. Working in isolation is sometimes a little demotivating. So start working as a team. So start competing as a team. You can even write notebooks as a team, and it's just like a little practice every day adds up to big results. It's really you just have to stick with it. Continue every day a little 1 or 2 hours every day, and slowly you will see the difference. It's not that I am perfect, but I think it works. It has worked for me.
Just to add to Parul's point of the exponential curve, so I believe when Parul was on her maternity leave, she became one of the best storytellers on Medium. And during the pandemic, out of boredom, she became a notebooks grandmaster. I guess she found some free time during both the periods, and that sort of stacked up. Okay, all right, now I'd love to open up to the audience questions, and please feel free to raise your hands and we can probably get you a mic if you have any questions.
Hi, so I have a question for all the grandmasters out here. So say you have something which you have never worked on before, say a new domain, maybe it could be a competition, maybe it could be some data set or some notebook you're writing about. So how do you approach when the domain is completely new to you? You haven't worked on it before. So there's a difference, say when you have worked on something before, so you have some prior experience, maybe you're trying to improve the models you built or doing some additional research. But say you are as good as a fresher, someone who is just starting into that domain. So how do you usually go about that?
approaching a problem, it's first I usually have a look at the data and try to think without looking at too many other solutions or public notebooks already. So get a first impression yourself. And don't think about the complex solutions first, but think about easy solutions or baselines that you can come up. And then get into that iterative state where you can just try to improve the last model that you have, try to improve it next. And then at some point you may want to reach out and look at other solutions, other ideas or public notebooks and discussions to expand your own view of the problem. And I think by combining then these two views, you get a great boost in the end. And it's the same idea with teaming up. So I really like to team up because you have a different view of the problem type, or every teammate has a different view. And if you combine it, you take the best out of each view and you just get a much better one. So it's like ensembling of people as compared to ensembling of models.
Yeah, that's a very good question that you're asking. I think something that just came to mind is don't jump into the modeling or the theory. Really get to grips with the data that's provided. Understand the metric. Even understand the data from a business standpoint, what they're asking you to do, right? That gives you a leg up over people that just rush in and try to use state-of-the-art models. So understand what exactly you're trying to solve. I think that makes a big difference.
In fact, I actually have an example for that. I remember there was this analytics competition that used to take place on Kaggle, and there was one on using satellite imagery data set. I had absolutely no clue about that, like which satellites are the ones. And I saw people putting in notebooks real quickly, so we had to find emission factors, and the emission factor we couldn't use they wanted us to use the satellite data to find out emission factors for NO2 and SO2. I had no idea what it is. And people were just putting on their notebooks, and in Kaggle you'll see if there's a new competition, and if you put the notebooks fast, you tend to get more votes. So I was really frustrated. But then, because I didn't have any idea, I said just stop. We just cannot just spin up any notebook. I actually researched, I read about 10 to 15 research papers. I went to Google Earth, I went to the site, I read about all the how data is collected, which satellites collect which sort of data. And I just, after that, I think I was about a month late, but when I put that notebook there, I exactly put all the data from NASA, and so that a lot of people who in the end won that competition, they actually said that this notebook acted as a starting point for our analysis. So this was, I was very happy. I learned a lot about it. I had no idea about it. And instead of just rushing to put on the notebook, I did learn a lot from it. So that's a great example, exactly like what you asked for.
Yeah, all these are great views by fellow grandmasters. I would like to give a slightly different view in a more general sense. I guess you also asked in more general way. What I would like to do is just get hands-on as soon as possible. So if there is a new domain, new problem statement, do get your hands dirty, because what I would like to take away from that activity is what are the gaps, what are the things that I don't know. I may have some clarity in say 20-30% things, but I don't know what other pointers are. So then I would probably structure my research according to those pointers, according to those learnings that I have done in the hands-on. So this can be applied to data science, to Kaggle, as well as other places as well.
Thanks for the answers, and thanks for the great question.
Yeah. Thank you for all the wonderful answers.
I'll probably try to squeeze in another question, maybe two. If anyone has more questions, please raise your hand. There's one in the back.
This question is specifically for someone who is aspiring to be a data scientist and not a seasoned professional in that. When you guys started, what gave you the confidence to start a Kaggle competition? You guys have felt that way, right? I don't know the deep learning part, or I don't know the computer vision, or I am just starting with the machine learning, whatsoever. What gave you the confidence to start with your first Kaggle notebook or competition? Yeah.
The For competitions, I think because I started right with competitions, so I think it's quite easy for me to answer this in that sense. So when I read some books or getting into data science, I had the impression that following books about solving Python programming actions on for machine learning, you're hitting a wall at some point because you're just working on these toy data sets all the time, and the solution is already there, and the book points you to the solution already. But as compared to Kaggle, it gives you a whole new problem without any guidance at all. And it was a really, really good experience for me to do that step and to start this on a white field, nothing, or green grass. There's nothing on it, and you just start programming and checking out what is working and what not. And I was actually very surprised about then the private leaderboard reveal in the end, because I was so much focused on that public leaderboard, just topping the, not even topping at all, right? Somewhere in the bronze medal zone, and then yeah, at the private leaderboard everything changed, and that opened my eyes at how you would really need to look at the data and how you would build robust models. And you can't learn that from books or any courses. You need to get your hands dirty, as Shivam said. So you really need to do that yourself, and nobody else can teach you that.
Yeah, for me, the biggest motivation was to test myself, as in like I was working individually as a data scientist in like my domain, in my organizations before, but the motivation to join Kaggle was to put together, let's say, my skill set on test in the real world and see what type of feedback am I getting. Are my models really working well? What are people saying? And is there anything that I can learn? So that was kind of the first motivation when I put the first notebook on Kaggle, and then it kind of became an iterative approach or a regular activity.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to think back about the first competition that I participated in. I think at this point it's like 5 years ago. I feel a bit nostalgic thinking back. But I guess from my perspective, it was really about learning, right? So I went in picking a topic I was interested in, NLP. And I'm pretty sure I did not have any expectations. So it was really about learning. And I think that puts a lot less pressure on you, right? So you talk about confidence. I think you should pick something that you're interested in, a competition that you're interested in, or a domain that you're interested in, and that would be like self-motivating.
We'll try to squeeze in one more question.
Thanks.
I see one in the back.
Hi everyone. So my question is with respect to all the tools like Codex and Code Whisperer coming into play, and also like huge developments going on in the AutoML field. So do you folks feel that human expertise and experience is going to be relevant in Kaggle for a longer duration, or there will be some changes in that? What's your opinion?
That's a very good question. I think, you know, some.
And are you biased about that?
Yeah, especially with LLMs as well. I think that's a question everyone is asking. I think we are asking ourselves, you know, where do we factor in with LLMs, you know, outside of Kaggle? But I think in some ways the human aspect of it is the most important, right? Because ultimately modeling without the human touch or understanding the actual business problem that you're solving, there's no value to that. So at the very least, having a human understand the problem that you're trying to solve, I think that's still always going to be important.
Yeah, it makes a big difference between data science on Kaggle and data science in your company, because data science on Kaggle always provides you a perfect data set or a well-curated data set already, and you can start working directly on it. Whereas in a company, you usually have to create that data set yourself. You have to label data and get to a point where you can even start learning or teaching a model, to train a model. And at this point, I think that, yeah, the evolution of LLMs right now can give you a large boost because it's already very, very good at zero-shot predictions. So you don't need to have that labeled data to get started, which goes into the same direction again. So getting the hands dirty is a much quicker process in this sense. And you can even use one of these large models to train a smaller one, which would then deploy on-prem on a very local machine, can even run on CPU. So you distill the large model into a smaller one. I think it really comes down to what you're working with, and Kaggle and business sometimes is very different.
I'll point out something silly for me, which is this is one of the perks of working at H2O, that I have access to great apps like Hydrogen Torch, and I usually sub through that, and my submissions take a while to beat that. So for the record, I'm on the side of AutoML and the amazing tools. But just to wrap up, you can find all of us around after the event if you'd like to interact with the folks here. This is literally one of the best data scientists panel in the world. This, I think, is the biggest collection in one place in India, at least in the history of Bangalore, even with this amazing history of building many incredible things. So please find the Grandmasters around, and you can also find more details about us on the H2OAI website. So we have a Grandmaster page there. There are quite a few of us, but you can find us there, find us on the internet. We're always open to sharing knowledge. Please find these folks. You'd love to chat with them, and we'd love to talk to you.